All right, so in the astronaut training, this is an occupational therapy technique where they're working with sensory motor integration. And there's three components. There's the vestibular activation. So that's where when you rotate them around, you're stimulating that inner ear. Number two, it's ocular motor, meaning it's visual. So it's eye tracking and gaze stabilization. So getting me to be able to focus and hold my gaze, that improves my visual motor integration, like hand-eye coordination or copying from the board, stuff like that. And then the third component in the astronaut training is auditory processing integration. So you can use sound and rhythm to help the brain process spatial awareness. So I find I like to do this with every kid, but especially with autism, developmental delays, autism spectrum, Asperger's, brain injury, people with dizziness, vertigo, balance. So what you're doing is either you're using a rotating board or you can use a chair, something you can spin. And you're monitoring the direction, speed, and duration to overstimulate. So some of these kids, if you try to do too much of the astronaut training, it overstimulates them. Now you can use a pen light or moving objects or visual tracking tools. And then also they're listening something. Sometimes you can pair it with, binaural beats or, some like in here, we use the SO chord. Now, the reason why we call it astronaut training is because in NASA, in astronaut training protocols, they would work a lot with the vestibular system, especially in different gravity environments. So just as astronauts have to adapt to movements in space, individuals and people with sensory challenges, they have challenges with gravity and moving their body as it relates to spatial awareness. Now, the actual,
So,
go ahead.
you said sitting in the chair. So, how many seconds would you take
Okay,
to speed?
let me give you the actual directions.
Okay.
Um, there, there's different kinds of movements you can make. You can go forwards and backwards with the chair. You can go side to side with the chair, and you can even go up and down. Okay. So each one of those is helping them with gravity awareness, postural control, and muscle tone. So you're working with what we call the postural reflexes. They come after the primitive reflexes. So if you're going to do the spinning, I like to do clockwise first, then counterclockwise. And I also can do diagonal movement as well. Now, the sequence of this is that when you do this standard rotation, I like to do between 3 and 5 in one direction. And then I pause for a few seconds to let the person process it. And then I'll do 3 to 5 rotations in the other direction. And I'm really monitoring the overstimulation. Like if they start saying, "Oh, I'm dizzy, I'm nauseous, I'm disoriented," I will do less on the next round. I do it slow. So it needs to be smooth, so you don't want to jerk it. And what I also will have them do is focus on a target, a visual target, as they're moving around. I might have multiple targets in my room. Okay, look here. And then they move. Now look at this target over here. And then look at this over here. So you can add that. But if they start getting dizzy, sometimes I'll just have them stop. We'll stop and just do breathing. Because you're going to find, like with this child, probably he's going to get overstimulated pretty quickly. So you may only get going around once or twice in each, in each direction, and then you stop, and that's it. Now, I tend to do the astronaut training for about a month. and we just incorporate it into our, primitive reflex work, our gross and fine motor therapies, those kinds of things. So it's a wonderful sensory motor integration that really takes in the vestibular, the visual, and the auditory, especially if you're adding kind of an auditory processing stimulant as well as the visual to you. We're going to talk today about visual skills, and we're going to talk about fine motor, cognitive vision connection. So this is part of our functional vision, but we're really talking about the visual skills. So what does this mean? So developing functional vision, it means enhancing visual skills and perceptual abilities. So we're working more with advanced things, okay, as opposed to staying with, balance and primitive reflexes. We're now working with specific eye muscle skills and how those eye muscles are helping the person process information. Okay. Now, as an example, one of the primary visual skills is visual tracking, the ability to smoothly and accurately follow a moving object with one's eyes. This visual tracking is so important with reading. So some of the behaviors we'll see if there's a visual tracking problem, if you're, tracking their eyes, do they have to move their head or their body to track their eyes? That tells you something. That tells you that reading is probably going to be difficult. And when I'm testing, I don't tend to correct or suppress the person. I'm just watching to see, hey, follow this target. Do I need to move my body? Do I need to move my head? Or can I just do it with my eyes? Ultimately, we'd want you to do it with the eyes. And we have the pursuit movement, that's the smooth movement, and the saccadic movement, jumping from one object back and forth. So both of them are important in the visual tracking. Now, there are different ways to assess visual tracking. There's a test that's very paper and pencil oriented that gives you a lot of results based on age. And it's called the King-Devick test. K-I-N-G is the first word, D-E-V-I-C-K. And sometimes if I need to do kind of a test where we've got norms for certain ages, because you're basically reading digits on this cardboard book, in this book. And at first there's lines that connect the numbers. Okay, and then the next page, there's no lines. And then the last page, the numbers are really spread out erratically, and that's harder to do. So you can measure how many times they miss reading the numbers, based on their age and so on. So you could do the King-Devick test if you're looking for that level of accuracy. What I like to do is I actually just have them move an object. So I move the object. I'm moving, so it could be a pen light, it could be a ball with a metal rod with a metal ball on it called a wolf ball. Could be a kind of a tongue depressor with a sticker on it. And so you can use one or two of them if you're doing saccades or pursuits. We do them in all the directions, circular and, diagonal. And we're looking for the accuracy of being able to hold on to the ball or hold on to the target while they're fixating on the target. You'll see kids sometimes do this. They'll overshoot. So they're looking at something and their eyes actually go beyond the target. We call that overshooting. Or they might be undershooting. So let's say they're following the target this way and the eyes kind of are moving in that direction. So you're going to see a lot of weird movements. And the eye tracking is a fundamental skill that's connected with, especially in the horizontal movements, with the primitive reflex called the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. So if I see an ocular motor tracking problem, I'm going to go back and test the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, because a lot of times that reflex is inhibiting the tracking to work well. So visual tracking is really essential in terms of reading. Now, one of the fun exercises I like to do, physical vision therapy, functional vision exercise, is called the alphabet ball exercise. So what I do is I write letters on a ball or even a balloon. That's even more fun. And I toss it to the individual and I have them call out the last letter they see before catching it. So again, you could do this with a Marsden ball. We have a Marsden ball with different letters and numbers on it. So while they're hitting the ball, I might have them spell a word, or I might have them, just call out the letters or the numbers. Again, if you're doing balloon volleyball, you can put letters on the balloon and they can call out the first or last letter. So there's different ways. You can also work with the visual tracking using a heart chart, which I think you know about, with an eye patch and a metronome. I like doing auditory processing along with that as well. So they have to say the letters. I'll put the letters in different triangle points on the dome, and I'll also have them do like a vestibular thing as well, like jumping on the physio ball or doing the rotation board or the balance board. These are more high level kids. Or we'll do prisms, while I was doing that with the last client. So yeah, in any way, you're really boosting the tracking, either where you do it with each eye separately or you do it with both eyes together. I kind of just mix it up, and that's what we do. All right, now the second skill that we talk about is called visual accommodation. This means that the lens of the eye is able to change its focus between near and far distance objects. And so one of the tests I use in that is have the individual switch their focus from an object like 10 inches away, like a small chart of letters, to one that's 10 to 20 feet away, and noting any delay or difficulty in the adjustment of the visual accommodation. There's less of that today because kids are on the tablet a lot and they're not using their desk and looking at the board. They're just kind of at their tablet. But visual accommodation comes into play a lot in sports. It comes into play a lot with bike riding. The things where you have to kind of shift your focus. Now we're in ski season, so with the boarders, can they board and kind of do that near-far focusing while they're keeping their balance? So in terms of vision therapy, my functional vision exercise, you can do it with the thumb, shifting it from a thumb up close and then looking out in the distance. I can do it with each eye separately. I like to repeat it for about 5 times to improve the accommodative flexibility. Sometimes I'll use 2 heart charts, one closer and one farther away, different sizes, different setups of the heart chart with the letters. I also like to use the vestibular system as a challenge. So we might again be on some kind of a rotation or balance board. And then the other thing is the metronome. I like the metronome at a slow speed, like 40 beats a minute. And we're just, shifting our focus back and forth. All right, now the third visual skill that I like to work with is what we call binocular vision. This has to do with both eyes working together. And I am really interested in the coordination between the 2 eyes. I'm going to stop here for a second. The coordination between the 2 eyes is critically important as it relates to depth perception, judging things in space. It's such an important skill in terms of the spatial IQ, of the person. And there was some work done by some optometrists, developmental optometrists, where they actually measured IQ and then they did vision therapy on them, and their depth perception improved and their IQ went up because they could see into problems more, they could see into solutions better. So binocular vision is super important. Now, we haven't gone over this test. This is called the cover test. And so the way you set this up is you sit across from the person about a foot away. Okay, so they're looking at you, you're looking at them. And what you're doing is you're having them look at a target, maybe about 14 inches from their face. So they're focusing on the target, and you're covering an eye. Now, as soon as you cover an eye, you want to watch the movement of the eye that's uncovered. Does it move away from the target? Does it drift away out or away in? That's going to tell you whether or not there's strabismus and if there's a lack of visual coordination. Now, the other thing you want to look at is when you take the cover away, what happens to the eye that was covered? Does it come back to look at the target? Does it drift away from the target? So we do both eyes. We have you cover the right eye. We say, look at the left, and then we go in the other direction. And then we say, cover the other eye. So we're covering the right eye, and we're covering the left. And we're looking at the movement of the eye behind the cover. If the eye goes in, then we know we're in an exo response. If the eye goes out under the cover, when you take the cover away, then that's an ESO response. Up and down also, you might see an eye, like you take the cover away, whoop, the eye is going up or the eye is going down. So the cover test is a way to do this. Another way to do it is with the red-green test, where you have them look at the red-green bars. And this test is going to show more general binocular vision possibilities or suppression. Because when there's a binocular vision problem, two things can happen: double vision or suppression. So on the red-green test, you're going to be able to ascertain, are they suppressing or are they using both eyes together? Now, you could even get a 3D picture book with Polaroid glasses. Berne Corporation sells this. And so basically it's a 3D book, the picture on it. You wear the 3D glasses and you go, oh my God, I can see depth in the picture. I can pinch the insect's wings as an example. Or the person might say, geez, the picture looks really flat to me. I can't really see it. So that's where I might do the red-green test to see if they're suppressing one eye or another. Now, one of the best exercises to develop binocular vision is the Brock string, which you are doing. You folks are doing these. And again, you attach one end of the string to a stationary object, and then the other end you hold it up to your nose and you spread the beads out equidistantly, and you focus on each bead, and you're just converging at each bead. And that's a way for you to develop the binocular vision situation. So it's such an important skill. Okay, we got a few more things we want to talk about. Hand-eye coordination. So this is how the eyes follow the hand. Reaching and grasping. There's a primitive reflex called the grasp reflex. You probably know it. And so we want to observe the person's ability to reach and grasp objects of various sizes, distances, and textures. And again, we're doing the alphabet ball exercise to improve eye-hand coordination. Keeping the ball, hitting it up, the balloon, for example, is a good eye-hand coordination. Catching a ball, Marsden ball, those kinds of things. Juggling with scarves. Throwing the scarf over here on the right and then throwing it here on the left. So anything you can develop that eye-to-hand coordination is really helpful. So now we're going to move into some of the cognitive skills like visual memory. There's a test called the Monroe Visual 3, which is a good memory test, but it's paper and pencil. Visual integration, visual motor integration. So another way to do it is to do the test is to show the individual a series of images or patterns and for them to then recall or reproduce from memory. That's another way to test the memory. And then there are memory games, matching card games. Concentration is a game we'll use. Anything you can locate specific images in a pair enhances visual memory. There's also a whole body of work I learned from a Dr. Wax, Harry Wax, who was a developmental optometrist. He has a whole program working with parquetry blocks and visual memory. All right, the next is form perception, recognizing objects despite changes in size, position, or context. So how do you assess form constancy? You present objects in various orientations and ask the individual to identify them, noting any difficulties in the identification. I like doing tangram puzzles as a way to enhance form perception or form constancy, where you engage the individual in assembling the tangram pieces to match specific shapes, improving their ability to recognize forms in different configurations. This is going to come into play in high-level mathematics, calculus, differential equations, even geometry. So this is very supported in math. All right, the next skill is called figure ground, being able to see the forest from the trees, to see the details from the whole picture. One of the techniques we use is utilizing puzzles, where the individual must find objects hidden within a busy scene, or enhancing visual figure ground discrimination by doing parts to whole relationship type parquetry designs. And then the last one is visual closure and spatial orientation. This is important because spatial orientation tells us about being able to understand where we are in space and where we're going. And understanding relationships is a key point. Now, this could be in sports, it could be just socially, but the key in spatial orientation is that what we want to do is we want to utilize different puzzles and worksheets where you must find hidden objects in a busy scene. Okay. Now, we also talk about something called visual closure. This would be like doing dot-to-dot drawings. It could be doing something like we call it the incomplete man test, where we have a diagram of a man with like one arm, his face, maybe one leg. And so we give it to the child and say, okay,